Welcome everyone to another video from the Dwarfs vs the World series. In today's episode I will discuss the Dwarven roster and where I rank every lord, hero, unit and regiment of renown. So as a disclaimer, I will be ranking these all based on my opinion through my playing experience, casting experience and testing. Therefore, these are my opinions and everyone is subject to their own. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. So we're going to start with a relatively easy one, and as you can see here we have 7 tiers from S all the way down to F, and they have descriptions alongside them. So essential, core units, very good. These should help you and should allow me to describe to you why they are where they are. So we will start with an easy one, which is Longbeards. So we'll be having Longbeards, and we'll move in also the Great Weapon variety and the Grumbling Guard. So if we pop into game, we'll put all 3 in, and I believe all 3 are S tier, and I shall explain why. So as we can see here with the Longbeards, they're going to be very good against almost anything that's going to be attacking them. So a good model count at 75, good health as well, 100 armor here with the bronze shield for 35% resistance to all missiles incoming, as well as that 80 leadership for a good hold, so a strong leadership as well, a very good melee defense at 48, a strong melee attack at 30, good weapon strength, and more importantly, they are going to have immune to psychology, so fear and terror doesn't affect them. They'll also give +4 leadership from encourage all around, and they have charge defense versus large with that base 25% magic resistance that you get for all dwarfs in the Dwarven roster. Now, what does this all mean? So this means they have a great resistance with their armor and their shields up against all missiles. With their armor, leadership, and very high melee defense, all infantry attacks on them in physical are not going to do very much damage. They're going to hold for a very long time, which synergizes really well with the Dwarven roster, as previously and commonly known, all of their damage comes from the back line, for example, Thunderers and Trollhammer torpedoes. So therefore, they normally brace in the front and they hold, while it's all the backline range and cannons does all the damage output. However, here there's going to be a couple of changes in the new meta, and that's going to come in with Thorek Ironbrow. Now, when on his Anvil of Doom, he has access to some other runes, which will be the Rune of Doom. So that's a map-wide effect of +24 melee attack, and it imbues fear, which means if they don't have immune to psychology, fear doesn't affect them. They won't be getting that -8 leadership. Now, 24 melee attack is really good, as dwarves are very well known for not having good melee stats. There are very few units that do, and here, as you can see, Longbeards, that really fixes one of their weaknesses here with low melee attack. 54 melee attack is really strong, if considering their 48 is already very strong, and that is there for 16 seconds with also that fear. So anything that doesn't have fear, they'll also be giving -8 leadership to as well. And then they also have another rune, which is my favourite out of the 6 that are brand new here, which is going to be the Rune of Speed. +24 melee attack and +45% speed. They can really aid them there in the front line for 18 seconds. So if you put both together, or one after another if you'd like, that's 34 seconds of +24 melee attack for any units that you decide to select in a 40-meter radius, and 16 seconds there for everything map wide. So that is a really good supporting tool for dwarf units that already struggle in melee attack, but are great. They're very good with a defense charge against large up against all chariots. They're very good against dwarfs. They have immune to psychology from fear and terror. Missiles don't do very much damage. Physical resistance very tough with the high armor melee defense, and magic resistance is already very low as well from those resistances. So overall, Longbeards have got an absolute toolkit of bonuses that really aid them in the front line and makes them such a great all-round unit. And what used to struggle from the Longbeard great weapons, they lose that shield. They also lose quite a bit of melee defense, 10 there, as you can see, but they do get extra weapon strength output. They don't get any changed on their melee attacks, but the weapon strength certainly changes, and the armor piercing goes up drastically. So 25 armor piercing output there, and when you include that with the Rune of Doom or there with the Rune of Speed, these become absolute lawnmowers. 54 melee attack with 25 armor piercing output, they just trawl through everything. And that is exactly why I love the Grumbling Guard as well. So the Grumbling Guard is a great amalgamation here of Longbeards and also Longbeard great weapons. Now, they are the great weapon variety, but they bring everything here that you get from the Longbeards. So as you can see, they've pretty much got everything Longbeards have got, but more. They've got the same melee defense, so they're getting that +10, which means they offer the same as normal Longbeards in holding the front line, but they also have good punchback as well. They're going to have added leadership +10, they're going to have all the immune to psychologies, all the bonuses there from encourage and defense charge against large. The only thing they lose is that shield, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's obviously the way it goes as well. But the one thing they do gain from that is also the grumblers. So that's going to be a plus 9% vigor, which means them and any units around them in a 40-meter radius will never drop to that lowest bracket of vigor, so they'll never be exhausted. And you don't drop melee defense until you become exhausted, which goes down to a 90%, which means if you do become exhausted, your melee defense will go down by 10%, but that won't happen here if you're near or you are the old grumblers, which means you're going to be holding at 100% for the entirety of the game. So that makes these just an exceptional unit, that, and also including when you also put down obviously the runes that we have talked about. So the rune of speed, the rune of doom, given that plus 24 melee attack, just makes these three absolute weapons on top of what they already do so greatly. So yeah, without further ado, we will move back into here. So that's why I put all three into the essential tier. You're going to be seeing these in a lot of matchups. They're very, very strong, as I just said, and that's why I guarantee that you will use them in the S tier, and you're going to be using them a lot. And something you do struggle here with the infantry is going to be immune to psychology. These are the only units that have it at base. There are a few that do have it as well, but they mostly come through Regiment of Renowned. But we will move on, and we'll move on here to the infantry. So we'll come in here with miners with blasting charges. Very good units. Also here with the Urkra miners with the ROR. I really, really do like them. The only issue we're going to have here is the miners. Now, I'm going to put miners here in the E tier. I do not like miners, but I really like miners with blasting charges. And we'll go through why. So, we'll put all three on the board, and we'll have a discussion. So, with the new runes that are in the game currently, with, for example, Thorek Ironbrow, we'll come to him next because I think he's going to be rather important here for the entirety of the conversation. But his rune of speed and his rune of doom offer melee attack for stats, for example, miners that just really suck. So if we look at miners, 80 armor is still decent for any other faction, but when they have these stats attached to them, they're not great. The only thing they offer really is good armor piercing output. 17 is very good for 22 weapon strength, and they do offer a good vanguard option. So if you are going for a vanguard rush build, miners could be in your toolkit, but they're still not great for doing it. I will always take blasting charges over them, as blasting charges are just so exceptional. So under the brand new Master Engineer, he actually comes with restock, which means he can actually not only restock ammunition from thunderers and cannons, and also like gyrocopters, for example, you can also do blasting charges. And blasting charges are a very good tool at removing lightly armored infantry, or chaff as we like to call it. So with chaff, or lightly armored infantry, blasting charges just destroy them. Like if, for example, pick a good unit like Bleak Swords, 450 cost. If you use all your blasting charges, you could 60 to 70% destroy their health with just one unit. And then obviously miners from there should be able to clean up, and then that's you winning the front line with the unit for the same cost, and your miners are really not going to take too much damage back for that value. And being they also have good armor piercing output, if there's any other elite units behind it, they should do okay, or at least put out some good damage value. Now the only problem is they don't synergize too greatly because of their melee defense. So if you just have a miner front line and the blasting charges come up against some very heavy armored infantry, they're going to punch through very quickly, and your thunderers are going to get hurt with almost no cover, unfortunately. So blasting charges are great, but you do need some support. For example, longbeards either in front of them so the blasting charges go over, or having the longbeards in behind so that they can come forward and protect afterwards, or at least aid in holding the front line. So I don't like miners. They don't really offer too much. I believe they're a waste of money. I would always rather take Dwarf Warriors, a little bit of the added cost. Blasting charges are very good, and the Urkra miners, so we'll go through those. They have added missile strength, so if we put these up to maximum, just so I can show you guys, so they cost 646 compared to the Urkra miners. Urkra miners still have more ammunition and more missile strength, so that's the main one. They're going to be having 2 extra ammunition. And for the cost here, so we put them back down to normal. For the cost, you're going to get plus 7 melee attack, 6 melee defense. That's not going to be so high compared to normal units because it's also distributed over the ammunition and therefore range. And also comes in with plus 10 leaderships that is going to aid in the front line with holding. So the stats are better, blasting charges are better. Generally what they do overall is just better. The one thing they did lose and that will stop them from going into the S tier is Frenzy. They used to have Frenzy. It didn't really make sense that they had Frenzy in the first place, but the fact they had Frenzy made them insane for their cost, but they didn't get a reduction. They pretty much just got a nerf in losing Frenzy. So they were S tier in my opinion, but now they're just A tier. I think they're just back with miners. You can take them, you can not. It's really entirely up to you. If you've got 175 extra gold, I could recommend it. I wouldn't say you'd be going wrong if you pick blasting charge miners for sure, for the Urkra miners. So I think in general, these synergize very well, and with Thorek Ironbrow, who we'll go through next, these three with a wide build, certainly the wider the build, the more benefits you get from Rune of Doom, and also invariably the more benefits you get from him using his runes. So if we jump back in here, yeah, so you can certainly see miners going in the top if they got Frenzy back, but I don't see that happening. I think it'd be a little bit unbalanced there. Unfortunately, they'd have to have an increased cost, because that'll also increase the armor piercing output as well, which is already quite high. It gives them a good melee attack, and obviously that's down to 50% leadership, and Dwarfs are very known for having high armor and high leadership, so yeah, perhaps that's not too balanced. But at the end of the day, they're still a very good core unit in A class, and I would keep them there for sure. So we'll move through to Thorek Ironbrow. We'll go through with our first Lord. He's going to be coming in a lot, and he's by far S tier. I've already talked about him a lot, but we'll go through with him. So we'll take everything off, and we'll go through it all individually, and I'll explain just why this Lord is so meta-defining. Now, he cost 1,000 at base cost, so if we compare him here to the old Rune Lord, he's going to have plus 60 weapon strength, plus melee defense, melee attack, leadership, and 807 health. So for that, he cost 850 at base, so for the extra 150, it's just a huge difference. It's ginormous in difference for 150 cost. It's so worth it. And if you also take into the fact that he has magic attacks and armor piercing, that makes him a very, very good hybrid in the way that he can also deal with ethereal units, but also he can punch up against other legendary lords as well, or at least other elite units. So if we do take the Anvil of Doom, the Anvil of Doom is a very nice item. So if we just take the normal Rune Lord, if you add on the Anvil of Doom, or his Anvil of Doom, he will get 25% physical resistance, and then you get these stats. So he's going to get plus leadership, plus melee defense, plus charge bonus, which is really not that important, but also 900 added health as well, which is a huge amount of health. With that extra 25% physical resistance is ginormous as well. That's going to make him super tanky against all missiles and incoming physicals as well. He also gets the Locust of Power, which means anything within a 100-meter radius that causes magic will always take minor miscast damage. So it's not normal overcast miscast damage, but it's minor. But it means it will happen every time, whether they do or do not overcast. So that's really important. So Spirit Leech is 100 meters. So what it causes there, it causes casters and everything else to cast from a wider distance. The casters have to stay well away from Thorek. And, you know, it's a good zone to make sure that they either have to overcast Spirit Leech or they have to have some other approaches of using their casters. And one free item here that you only get with Thorek Ironbrow and you don't get here with the Rune Lord or the Rune Smith is going to be the Rune of Doom. This is the biggest changer in the game for Dwarfs currently, and this is 16 seconds every 2 minutes, plus 24 melee attack, and then also plus fear. Now that is incredible when it's map wide. Pretty much all Dwarfs struggle with melee attack apart from the few odd units, so having this is so incredibly strong. And that is there, it's just a 1400 cost that you can use that every 2 minutes, and he's pretty tanky anyway, and he's going to deal with ethereal units, which the Dowie struggle with, and he also has good armor piercing output, and he's just super, super tanky. So for his abilities, he is going to have Forge Fire. 150 cost, I don't recommend it, if I'm honest. I don't think it's particularly great. If you do go for a full build of, say, Longbeards, and you also go with Dwarf Warriors that don't have much armor piercing output, Forge Fire can be nice, but I think it's a bit costly for what you get. I don't think it's particularly great, but you can certainly use it. If you want to make him into a bit of a nuke, you could add all of the items, including his increase to his armor, and just make yourself more tanky and make them weaker, and then try and overwhelm it that way in a 40-meter radius. The only problem with that in the current meta is area of effect spells do way and above more range than they should do. So although it's say 40 meters, some spells are doing 50, even 60 meters of damage, which means they're hitting invariably somewhere up to sometimes 75% of Dwarf builds in a small box. So that, unfortunately, with that bug, it is affecting Dwarfs in the current meta, which is why, unfortunately, things like 40-meter spells or 40-meter effects aren't so great at the moment for the Dwarfs. So that's why the Rune of Hearth and Home is okay. 55 meter radius is huge. Immune to Psychology is really strong. But of course, if you've gone for a full build here with Longbeards, and for example the RRP Gate Guard or the Nord Grimlings that already have it, you can build a force that does have Immune to Psychology. You don't have to take the Rune of Hearth and Home, but if you certainly want to go with a cheaper build or something a little bit different, it can be very helpful. Now both of these do come here with the Runesmith, but one thing you don't get is going to be the Master of the Ancient Lore. Now this here is when he's engaged in melee combat, it actually gets reduction on all spell cooldowns. Now that is really, really important. So when he's fighting in combat, he's already super tanky, 120 armor, he's got 25% physical resistance, also that missile resistance as well, so he's going to be having 40% missile resistance, and that magic resistance. He's just super, super tanky. And then also when he is going to be fighting in combat, he's going to be getting those runes back faster. Rune of Doom is going to come back faster. All of these runes that you can pick are going to come back faster, which you do not have that option here for the Rune Lord. And if we go through the runes, we're going to have the Rune of Slowness, a top choice, definitely in the top 2 for me. The top choice overall is the Rune of Speed. I'm almost invariably always going to be taking the Rune of Speed. Plus 24 melee attack just fixes almost 90% of the problems that the Dwarfs have. And Rune of Slowness is meta defining. Slowing down units because the Dwarfs are so slow and allowing them to pick the engagements they want is something the Dwarfs do not have access to. Unless you go with a Gyrocopter build, you are invariably having to react to everything that your opponent brings towards you. So having this spell means that you can decide some of the build, or at least some of the fights you want to have. So the third one is probably Rune of Breaking. I do like Rune of Breaking. It's okay. It's a bit of a coin flip whether you really need it. There are a few factions that you can certainly utilize it for. It can synergize really well with, for example, Slayers who do not have too much armor piercing output. You can certainly put that on them and they can perform way and above their price pool. But of course there, if you use that, you're not going to be able to use any other runes here from Thorek. I have seen a lot of Rune of Wrath and Ruin. It does fire damage, it doesn't do magic, but when overcasted, it does do well against armor. Now, I've seen it, but I've never really seen it used it to any kind of effect, and even if you do cast it normally, it doesn't really do much to armor, so it's only going to do well against chaff, which you have blasting charges for anyway, and also other tools, which we'll get to later on in the video. Or you can overcast it and do armor, which is not really going to be worth its cost, considering it's going to be a longer time before you can use any other spells that are better in my opinion anyway. You have the Rune of Oath and Steel. Very good, overcasted for 60 armor, but not utilized really too strongly here for the Dwarves, who already have a very high level of armor. And then the Rune of Negation, probably the fourth choice for me. This one can certainly has some really good unique stuff. If you do go, say, sub-faction, say with Clan Ungrund, you could, for example, take a Thane here, an Ethereal Thane, that could certainly be used there for sure. Give it some magic resistance and bump it up to 95% physical resistance for a short duration of time. You know, that could certainly be used here for that, or you can use it to protect any units, for example, Slayers, ones that have glaring weaknesses, for example. So these do have all the utilizations. I'm always going to be taking Rune of Speed and Rune of Slowness in my meta matchups, but it's up to you. Play around with them and see what you think, but these two are the two I would recommend. And then the last item, we are going to have the Thorek's Rune Armor. Now this really depends on the builds and what you're playing against. One thing this really can help with is if you are going to have Thorek in the back, let's say we're up against Lizardmen, we're going to be seeing some rock drops coming in for some Pterodons. They do actually have a base fire damage up against them, so when they drop the rocks, they actually do base fire. So that added armor and the added fire resistance can help against that. Otherwise, it's good. It is really good. You know, it brings, for example, Dwarf Warriors up to 100 armor, which you're going to be in that Longbeard category, or you're going to be bringing Longbeards up to 115, where you're going to be getting closer here to Norgrimling armor. So it is very good, and also puts 120 up to 135 for Thorek Ironbrow. He doesn't have any missile shield protection, so that can also help as well. So these are just added items. You could see this or you could not. It depends on if you've got extra cash and if you think it's going to be worth it for that 40-meter radius. If he's in the front line, he's fighting all the time, or you want to protect your backline range, this can be very, very helpful. So for the majority, you're going to be seeing at about 1,830, and for that price, for all the weaknesses that he covers and the way he synergizes with the Dowie, the best pick by far. Without a shadow of a doubt, I don't think any Dwarf main can argue with that. I think he is the best thing to come out of the DLC by far. He head and shoulder bumps, the same as Marathi bumps Dwarf's upper tier single-handedly. And even then could arguably bump him up a second tier if you synergize it together altogether. He's definitely probably a B+ with the Dwarfs with him in it. Could arguably be A tier as well. He makes this faction very, very strong. So for that reason, I have to put him in the S tier. You could almost make an S+ tier where he's in it, because he really does bump everything else up with him. But he's going to be in the S tier with everything else for sure, because I think regardless of that, you're going to have Longbeards and a few others up here with him anyway. But if we move on, we'll move on here to some Dwarf Warriors. I think all Dwarf Warriors are going to be in the A tier, I think. And I will explain why. A lot of it is going to be down to Thorek, and I will explain as we go forward. but he's certainly going to bring a lot of benefits to the table for these units. They are going to be a little bit cheaper, which means you can certainly go a little bit wider. And they also fill in some of the weaknesses that they already had, as we've explained. As you can see, all have low melee attack, so it's going to be 22, 24, and 29 even at triple gold chevron. So, as you can see here, they're going to get plus 7 melee attack, but they get plus 10 melee defense and plus 10 leadership. So that increase there for the Rune of Speed and the Rune of Doom is going to be super helpful here for the Dwarf Warriors. Now, they're really good units in general. 85 armor, bronze shield, good number 75 as well, good leadership for their price. You're not going to see much better for armor and leadership here in this current category at the mid stage of infantry. Also very good 40 melee defense, good weapon strength, okay melee attack, not great, not bad either. And they also come here with charge defense first large, and of course that magic resistance. So that, yet again, they're going to be very good at resisting missiles, magic, and also incoming melee attacks. So again, ticking the boxes. But they do lose out on everything you do get with the Longbeards. They don't get that encourage, they don't get that immune to psychology, and of course they're losing out on some melee defense, armor. They're basically going to be just cheap variants of Longbeards, but nowhere near as good at all, cost efficient in my opinion. Rune of Doom, so I think great weapons have been buffed even more than the base ones, just because of the damage output. They are damage output, which doesn't always really synergize too well, because that's invariably what you lie back on with your Thunderers or your Quarrelers or your Cannons. They're the ones that are going to output all the damage, whereas normally you're meant to hold the front line there with your Infantry. But with the Rune of Doom, and also here coming in with the Rune of Speed, Dwarf Warriors with great weapons can also become lawnmowers. I mean, it doubles their attack. It goes from 24 up to 48 melee attack. And there are some units like, I think Chosen with great weapons have 48 melee attack. I believe it's 48 or 46. So, you know, they're going to be fighting at that stage. And if you do it properly, there's going to be 34 seconds of that as well, which can be enough sometimes to change the tide and maybe even win a battle there that they probably shouldn't be winning. So, you know, that's why they're really going to be seeing an indirect buff here in the current meta because of a single legendary lord. And the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are a really nice, unique unit. They are very, very good. They are situational. They are probably the best situational unit that are going to be in the S tier. And the reason is they're very often compared to Longbeards. A lot of people ask me, why would you ever take Longbeards over Warriors of Dragonfire Pass? This is probably the second biggest discussion point for the Dwarfs when you also consider Rangers and Quarrelers. So the difference you're going to get here with Longbeards, if you had a coin flip, you're going to be taking Longbeards more often than not. And the reason being is because invariably they're going to have better uses overall compared to Dwarf Warriors who are more situational. So for example, with Longbeards, they have immune to psychology, they cause encourage. They do have worse melee defense, but they have a much better armor class and more... yeah, a little bit more output as well of damage. They do have anti-infantry for the Dwarf Warriors, but invariably you could use both here. Now, in the situations that you do bring Dwarf Warriors, a good example is Wood Elves with Dryads front line. They're going to have fire damage because they have fire weaknesses. They're also going to be anti-infantry. It's not huge, but it certainly does buff. 6 there is pretty nice as well. And also they have a huge 50 melee defense. I know they only have 85 armor. They do have charge defense first large, but they are very good. And when they are partnered up, for example, we will go through it a little bit later, but when they are partnered up with the Dragonback Slayers, with their ability, the power of the Dragonback, that actually also imbues a fire weakness. You can do that even further again. You can do that with a Thane or a Runesmith. Both of them have the Ironbeard's ring, which is going to be this item here. That gives a 20% weakness to fire. So if you get all these three together, you can really buff up the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, and you have a real death squad there of 3 going through that can just punch holes in the front line and really make your opponent panic when you've got just 3 really strong infantry units punching through and just causing havoc everywhere. So I think in that argument, they're very situational, but they're still really strong. If they have an opportunity to have a good play in the game where fire could be really good up against regeneration, I'm invariably always going to take 1. If I have, for example, 5 units, let's say I was going to take 4 Longbeards, I could justify taking a Warrior of Dragonfire Pass and 3 Longbeards, because even if I don't get to utilize their fire, they're still going to be very good at 50 melee defense. That melee defense is still huge, so they're still going to do exactly what I want them to do, which is hold the front line so that my range can really get a punch, and with the anti-infantry, including all the runes for the added melee bonuses, they're still going to be lawnmowers. They're still going to do what I need them to do. When they get that charge bonus off, when they get in and get that 13 seconds there of bonuses, it is going to be very, very good. So that's, for me, it's exactly why when they're bonused here with the correct Lord, They're certainly A tier. They're core. These three infantry here are going to be your bread and butter towards holding that front line, and unfortunately miners here will not be within that. So this is where it gets a little bit difficult. Now, these two, we're going to be going with hammers. Hammers have a potential bug in the current meta, which is when they're charging in and they hit their splash damage, people have told me that it does damage up against themselves. Now, I haven't seen this myself in my casting or in my gameplay, but I have been told it exists. I'm going to do this as if that bug does not exist. I'm going to give you what I think they are and how good I think they are. Now, I'm going to start with the normal one. I think the normal one's got to be B or C. This is really difficult. They did go up in cost. I'm going to put them here for now with the potential to change. And I'll explain why. So, if we move through here, we'll see the Peak Gate Guard and we'll see the Hammerers. Now, Hammerers here did go from 1100 up to 1200. They got a buff in their melee defense. They were a bit squishy. I think they got plus. They went from 35 to 38, I believe. And then they got 100 increased the cost. But they are one of the few infantry units that actually have more melee attack than they have melee defense. As you can see here with their armor piercing, 41 armor piercing out of 55 weapon strength over that 10 seconds. That's a punch and a half. That's 41 damage per model going through all armor. That's exceptional. 100 armor as well, good leadership. And as you can see with the Longbeards here, for the cost of 500 different, armor and leadership is no different. The difference you're looking here is these are already lawnmowers without any bonuses. Now, if you add bonuses, which I don't think is all that necessary because they've already got very high melee attack, I actually don't think giving them plus 24, putting them up to 70 is really that important. So Rune of Doom is a nice bonus for them, but I really wouldn't be using Rune of Speed on them. I don't think that that's necessary. I also don't think there's many other runes you could particularly utilize for them. Rune of Breaking is not that important. They've already got loads of armor piercing. Armor Sundering is also not too important. There's not really much more that it synergizes with. The one thing you could do is give it damage resistance, or you could give it more armor. More armor could be nice here if you are going to go with a Hammerer build. A 100 is not great for its class. As you can see here, for an extra 50, you're going to get 125 and a bronze shield from the Ironbreakers. But 100 for 1.2k is not huge for the Dwarfs. It's a little bit on the low side, but they have great charge. Much better melee defense, I must admit. 35 to 38 doesn't seem like much, but actually it's a lot when you're talking elite infantry, and I like them. I think they're very good in certain matchups. I like them against Dark Elves, I like them against High Elves, I like them against elite anti-infantry armor-piercing units. They really thump back nice and hard, and I mean hard. They thump back with vengeance. Literally, they've got vengeance on the hammer, and they whack hard. And the same goes for the Peak Gate Guard Hammerers. Now, these are not quite essential. They are essential in certain builds, which could quantify them being an S tier, but I don't think they're strong enough to be an S tier unit, which is why I'm going to put them in the A tier. They are core units, but they're not quite essential. They are very expensive. 1,550 is tremendously high. They've already got really high melee stats. So you can see plus 11 melee attack, plus 10 melee defense, and plus 10 leadership. So they're going to be very, very high. Now, the one bonus they do get is immune to psychology. Now, that is really key. You can see the biggest weakness is no ITP for Hammerers. So they can be feared and they can be terrified. Same with Ironbreakers as well. They don't have any brace mechanics, so chariots can do some work up against them, that's for sure. And you're not going to get the same here for the Peak Gate Guard. But the one thing they do offer is armor sundering and obviously lots of armor piercing. The piercing is going to be the same at 41, but armor sundering, reducing that armor as well, can be really, really helpful. And the most important thing is magical attacks. They are the only units in the entire Dwarven roster that offer magic. The rest comes from Lords and Heroes. So Gotrek here has magical attacks, so does Thorek Ironbrow, so does Thorgan Grudgebearer, and the last one is going to be Grombrindle. So they're the only unit in the roster that can sort of really fight up against those ethereal units. It's not really where they're best placed, but sometimes it's always helpful to have them. So they can synergize quite well in areas, and they have multi-purpose use. So even if they do fight against ethereal units, they can now go bash something with 100 armor and do relatively well there against it. They're great damage dealers. They're really good front line. You could certainly see someone bringing something like this. This could be a really good front line with a cheap lord where you don't actually need to buff their front line. Let's say you want something anti-large. You go here, for example, with Unger of Iron Fist. You could see this as a big whack force. This could be, come at me, bro. Your chariots aren't going to do much to me. Or even if they do, I'm going to thump them back really, really hard. Just as an example. So that's why for me, they're good. They're very good units. Are they the best? You could quantify them being good. They are pricey. They are pricey for what they're doing. I think everything else is more efficient doing it. But the magic here for these are exceptional. The fact that they are multi-purpose makes them core units in certain matchups, especially against Undead as well. So with Undead, with all their theory units, they have that magic, and they also have ITP, which means that Terror and Fear, which is very common in those builds, is not going to affect them. So I think that's how I have to leave it. I think I'm going to say good for now, and maybe we'll come back later and change it. Yeah, so I think we'll move through to the next one, which is going to be the Nor-Grimling Ironbreakers and also the normal Ironbreakers. Now, Ironbreakers are very strong. They are very, very tanky, and without doubt, they synergize the best in the roster. They offer exactly everything you want, all in one package. There is one downside. They are hugely expensive. And I'm going to do this. A lot of people aren't going to like it, but I'm going to explain why. I'm going to have a rationale behind everything I do, and let's get into it. It might take a moment, but as we can see here, Ironbreakers and Nor-Grimlings. So the difference here is going to be 400 cost. The difference here was 350, but the difference here is going to be 400. Now, as we can see, lots of bonuses. And the first one, that is the most important one, is going to be 75 units to 90. Now, Ironbreakers in general, so you can only take 3 of them maximum anyway in the multiplayer scene, but 3 Ironbreakers, 66 melee defense, huge armor, 125, bronze shield as well, so that's 35% missile resistance. They have expert charge defense, so that negates all charge incoming from attackers, and they also have 25% magic resistance as base. Lots of health as well. They have truckloads of health, and their missile strength is way and above. We can see normal blasting charges at 36. They're going to be 49, and they get 2, and they get 60 meter radius, which is a little bit longer. So not only do they hold for an age, they also remove chaff, and they're going to hold against elite infantry, while you pretty much just stand there and shoot it. The only problem is your build is going to be nowhere near as wide. And actually, you'd be surprised at just how strong these blasting charges do. These blasting charges do fire damage. These do not, but they hit so hard for their explosive damage. It is incredible. And if we do put one up to triple chevron, we can see here the benefits. So we're going to go up by 10 on the leadership, 9, 13, and 10. Whilst if we compare that here to the Nor-Grimlings, we're going to get 13 instead. So you're actually going to get more missile strength anyway, and you're going to get more models. That's even more blasting charges. That's not going to just be extra strength. That's going to be an extra 2 per model. So it's an extra 15 models. That's an extra 30 blasting charges. That's more health. That's more tank. That's more hold. And that's 79 melee defense for Nor-Grimling Ironbreakers is just so goddamn strong. And not only that, they have a little sneaky thing that not many people know about, and that is Vanguard. Now, they can Vanguard here with miners. All miners can Vanguard. That includes the Urkra miners and the normal ones, which means if you want to do a Vanguard push here, which pretty common is seen by myself, I normally do a Vanguard build that say 4 miners, the Urkra miners, and I'll also do the Nor-Grimling Ironbreakers. These 6 will go together as a very strong Vanguard force, so I can push something, for example, the Skaven, something that would probably trying to sit back and out-snipe me. And with the Nor-Grimlings, they also have immune to psychology, and also, of course, that expert charge defense. So they're going to have everything the Longbeards have to offer, everything the miners have to offer, and more. 79 melee defense. There are very few even lords that have that sort of melee defense, and naturally I can't think of really any on the top of my head, but that is a huge amount of melee defense. Trying to hit Nor-Grimlings is almost impossible. Also, even if you do, that armor is just going to reduce that base weapon damage so much. Missiles are going to almost do nothing, and they have 95 leadership. 90 models, immune to psychology, so they're not affected by fear and terror. They can Vanguard. Chariots are almost going to do nothing as well. They are probably one of the best, or the best synergizing models here in the game for the Dowie. They're going to remove chaff, they're going to hold back, they're going to allow you to shoot, and it's pretty much everything you want in a package. And pretty much, if you add everything here, they offer it. And they actually got an increase, I think it was by 5 melee attack. So they were 38, they've now gone to 43. They did get an increase in cost by 100, I believe. Yeah, I believe it was 100. But it's certainly worth it, because that's a plus 5 melee attack, and then you can also increase the melee attack by Thorek Ironbrow, which means actually you can start hitting, at peak gate guard level. So actually, in some cases, it might be better to take Nor-Grimling Ironbreaker front line, even sometimes than peak gate guard, because you'll just remove chaff, you won't get exhausted, and then you'll fight against the real stuff. So I think they're a very, very good unit in my opinion. and that's why they were an S tier for me compared to the normal ones. The normal ones are still very good. Two of these and the Nor Grimlings make for a very difficult time to break down. But here we can move through the Slayers. So we'll be having the normal Slayers, the Giant Slayers, and the Dragonback Slayers. So the normal Slayers are going to be in B, so are the Giant Slayers, but A is going to be the Dragonback. Now, I think a lot of people are not going to be happy about that. A lot of people will go, but why are they in B tier? Like, Slayers are like so necessary here for the Dwarven faction. I agree and also disagree. You don't have to have them in every faction. For example, if you do have large dinosaurs, you don't have to take them down with Slayers. You can shoot them. And sometimes they can actually just be a 900 gold cost that's just going to get shot to death, and it's a bit of a liability. You can go both ways, but they are still phenomenal units. Slayers in general, just take a quick look. Even though they have no armor, they do actually have 30% block due to their whirling axes. They actually chop all those arrows out of the sky, which is quite funny. And you can have Death Blow and they're unbreakable. They do have that magic resistance, and I believe it's a 24 bonus first large. So, and pretty good armor piercing considering they're not an armor piercing unit. 16 armor piercing per model, which also 60 models, is still pretty impressive. 48 weapon strength, and it's one of the few units in the roster that has more melee attack than melee defense. 40 speed, so pretty much their infantry cavalry here as well, especially if you compare it to Longbeard's 26 up against 40. They move pretty fast. They'll move faster than most range infantry, so they should be able to catch. They're actually a pretty good common use up against Wood Elves. So Wood Elves, most of their range is between 36 and 40 speed, so invariably Slayers can catch them. But why do I put Dragonback Slayers above normal Slayers? Well, here's the reason. So, just looking at the stats, you're obviously going to get an increased cost by stats. So, the increase is by 300 gold. You're going to see a plus 10 melee attack and a plus 9 melee defense. That's already awesome. You can already expect 200 gold for that cost. So, let's put these up to triple. So, put them up to triple gold, you can see they're already going to be more expensive. The leadership doesn't matter because they're unbreakable. But essentially you can see they're exactly the same stats, and these are 44 more expensive. And you get even more bang for your buck here. So you're going to be getting the most important item, which is the power of the Dragonback. And we've already talked about how good slow is. So slow here, negative 35% speed. Slow allows you to pick your engagement. So for example, if you hit anything with the Dragonback Slayers, that is going to be a 35% slow for 10 seconds. So let's say you flash bomb something, or you slowness rune it. That means they're going to be going down, and then they'll go down even more as a multiplier here from the negative speed. Also gives them a fire weakness and gives them a flame resistance as the power of the Dragonback. So it has a multiple use and means if anything does try to get into that backline or into that pocket, once it's in there, those Slayers are going to get in, they're going to slow them down, Thunderers are going to rip them apart, and they're not going to want to come back for a second time. They also have charge defense first large, and they come with 20% physical resistance. So not only here do they have those shields against all those missiles, that's going to be giving them 50% missile resistance if they do have their axes up and ready to go, but also 20% physical resistance up against any other infantry. So that is really, really important as well, and that really does it just really helps keep them for a unit that's particularly not that tanky. It is a very, very good glass cannon. It will rip apart anything large with its bonus first large, but the problem here is it's very susceptible to getting shot. It's very susceptible to having magic all over it, like Burning Head destroys it. So you do have to be careful with your Slayers, and they really can be thrown and can throw the game if you're not careful. And then we have the last unit here, which is going to be the Giant Slayers. So we'll actually bring back up some normal Slayers. So Slayers to Giant Slayers, we can see all the stats are going to increase. They're going to have plus 600 health, plus 10 melee attack, plus 2 melee defense. They're also going to have armor piercing, extra bonus first large, and they're going to have extra charge. So as we can see there already, that's where your 300 gold cost is going from all the stats. Now, they're not just going to get a little bit, they're going to get 30 bonus first large instead of 24, and they're going to get bucket loads of armor piercing. So it's going to go from 16 all the way up to 35. But that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is something you cannot see here, which is mass. So Giant Slayers have a much greater mass than normal Slayers, which is amazing when you're going to be pinning in things such as heavy chariots. One thing that the Dwarfs certainly struggle with is heavy chariots. So having Giant Slayers ready to go, so when those chariots do come into the middle of that pocket, you can certainly hit them there with the Dragonback and slow them down, or use a flash bomb, etc., to put them in the pocket, and then get Giant Slayers on them to pin them in place, whilst they whack them with their nice big heavy axes. Now, the downside for that is, of course, they have no shield. They have absolutely no resistance to missiles. So that's where the Rune of Negation here from Thorek Ironbrow could be utilised to make sure they don't take too much damage. So that is also something you can take into consideration. So Slayers in general for me, B&A 100%. Dragonbacks offer so much for their value, and you could argue that these two are very good. I'd say the heavier Slayers with the great weapons, they're a little bit more situational, but they still offer a lot. They offer a lot here to the roster. And now we can move on to the range core, and we're going to start with the Thunderers. Now Thunderers, without a shadow of a doubt, are S tier. Yet again, the same with Longbeards. For their value, but they are probably the best value for infantry range in the game, and I'll explain why. So let's put a unit of Thunderers in here. Thunderers cost 700 gold, and if we just take one look here, they're going to have 17 armor piercing per model. That's an amazing amount of armor piercing, and their durability is absolutely insane. So 80 armor plus a silver shield that gives them 35% missile resistance to any incoming missiles that are small. They also have pretty good leadership, 28 melee defense and 20 melee attack. So if you put a rune boost on there, you're actually going to get 44 melee attack. So they can actually defend themselves pretty well. Good ammunition and pretty decent range. Like 145 is okay. It's a little bit on the low side, but it's pretty decent otherwise. The only problem you have with Thunderers is firing angle. But my rule of thumb is as long as you have one unit of Thunderers alive, the game is always on. Thunder and damage output is absolutely absurd. The only downside, of course, is speed. 28 speed is going to be the same here as any Dwarf Warriors, but for the damage output they bring is just exceptional. I really can't think of any other infantry range that can really offer the same output as you get from Thunderers for also their durability. Also having that magic resistance, so they're going to be very good here up against any sort of missiles with the 80 armor and the bronze shield. They're going to be very good up against any spells with that magic resistance. Melee's okay. They're okay. 80 armor, still 28 melee defense. That's not terrible. That's actually going to be better than miners. They're going to be low side. I think they're going to be roughly similar here to Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. So they're not too far off. Obviously, the stats are going to be a little bit different, but not too far different. So they're still relatively durable. So for me, they have to be in the S tier. They're far too strong not to be. And this is where probably the biggest argument not really argument, the biggest debate comes in from the Dwarfs, which is going to be Rangers versus Quarrelers. Which is better and why? I think they're both B tier. I think they're both very strong and they can be utilised in a multitude of situations. Which is better and why? It's a difficult one. Quarrelers are far much more durable. Rangers are faster, better mobility, and obviously have Stalk. So we'll go through it here. So let's start with Rangers. They're going to have Stalk, and they're going to have Vanguard deployment. So their uses are going to be very good with push builds, or flanking builds, or any sort of Vanguard builds, and they're going to be faster. So they're going to be able to move around pockets better, protect themselves a little bit better, or at least stop them from getting impacted so much. Whilst as Quarrelers are going to be much better at defending themselves in melee combat if they need to, and they're going to be better at missile duel fights. So they do have 80 armor and the bronze shields, same there as the Thunderers, but they're not going to have the AP output. So they're going to be exactly the same. Here they should be having roughly about 6 per model. If we can get onto that, it looks like we can't for some reason, but it's going to be about 6 per model. But they have 22 ammunition, so very good. Good melee defense, 28. Melee attack is a little bit on the low side. So overall, they're very good units. They're very good counter-skirmishers. So, for example, Chameleon Skinks. If you try and shoot the Chameleon Skinks back, they're not going to do any damage to you, but you can do a lot of damage to them. But they're going to do more damage up against Rangers. But Rangers are cheaper. So if you're like me, when you first saw, why Quarrelers only 25%? Why they only 25 cost more expensive when they have an extra 40 armor, extra health, extra leadership? It makes no sense to me. But the reason it's going to be is the fact that they're just far much more mobile. You basically pay for mobility over durability. So I think it's down to you. I think in the current meta of the game, mobility is way above more valuable for almost every other faction. But I think for Dwarfs, if I had to pick a side, I think durability is always going to be better for them. If you could have mobility, amazing, but I don't think it's worth the cost of durability. Durability and mobility is going to be your best, obviously, for the Dwarfs. So I think in that state, they're pretty even. But more than not, I'm going to have Quarrelers over Rangers if I can. But of course, if you have 4 Rangers against 4 Quarrelers, you'll still save 100 here, which you can put towards something else if you take Rangers, and you'll still get the same damage output, because they're still both crossbowmen. It's just how they're going to be kitted out. And then we move on to this. This is one of the disappointments of the day. This is going to be our first very bad. I don't know how to start with this one. This one hurts a bit because I've never once used quarrels of great weapons unless I've confederated them on single player. And even then, I more invariably get rid of them because they're a waste of money. When it comes to durability, they lose their one thing, which helps make them durable, which is their bronze shield. So in missile fights, they're not going to be as strong. But what do they gain? They gain melee stats. They basically become more of a hybrid. But I don't want them to be a hybrid, is one of my arguments. I don't want quarrels to be hybrid. I want them to be ranged units. If I'm bringing them in the scenario in which they might have to fight in melee combat, I feel like I'm already doing something wrong. It's my thought process. They do have better stats. They do fight in melee better, but they shouldn't have to. Unless there is no way that you can stop melee engagements, for example, fellbats, etc. But even then, you're not going to need the armor piercing for such light armored units. So invariably, I think they're not very good. I don't think they've ever been very good, and they are the bottom of the bottom for me, I'm afraid. I just cannot see in any way why you would take those over rangers or why you would take them over normal quarrelers. I can't see it. But we can now move into rangers with great weapons. These came in here with the new DLC from Warhammer 1. So they came in with Belagar Ironhammer. Where do I put these? I think I put them in C. And then these go into A. Yeah, I think without doubt. I think that's the way it's got to be. And I will explain why. So if we take rangers with great weapons, and then we also take Ultra Raiders. So if we can look at the stats here, we can see that not very much armor, good armor piercing for the weapon strength. So they're pretty much going to be quarrels with great weapons, but they're going to have far much more damage output from the armor piercing point of missile view. But they're going to have less range. They're only going to be 80 range. Now they do have Vanguard deployment and Stalk. So the Stalk helps them with the small range, but the Vanguard also gives them the extra option there to be a push, a Vanguard, or a rush. So that is the advantage you do have with the Off-War Raiders or the Rangers. But as you can see here, we can look at the stats. Now, the stats already for that 100 cost increase, you can already see that the stats pay for themselves. Plus 13 missile strength, plus 7 melee attack, 7 melee defense, and 10 leadership. That already pays for the 100 already, comfortably. Let alone you also get this ability which is marked by Ulthwar. That's negative 30 armor, negative 20% missile resistance, and a negative missile parry of 24. So that would be a silver shield down to a bronze shield, or a bronze shield down to no shield at all. Now that's huge there for anything you just want to delete. You just click it on a unit and you delete it, and that can really help with firing with Thunderers, that can really help with firing with Quarrelers, or that can really help with firing even with blasting charges. It has an effect. So therefore, I just think head and shoulders above Ultra Raiders are just way and above better than Rangers, and you could even justify just taking Ultra Raiders on their own just for this ability and also their damage output. And even when you put them up to their triple gold chevron state, they're going to be 179 cost more expensive, and even then the Ultra Raiders still have more missile output. This is for my cost value increase from normal to ROR. This is the best value of ROR money from normal compared to ROR you're going to get in the game. I think these are a little bit OP for what they are, but they are still very, very great. But they're very strong for the ROR unit in the faction of being OP, but they're not OP in the faction. I think Thunder is a way and above better and they offer more, but they do synergize very well with Thunderer heavy builds. So for that reason, they're going to be in the A tier. They can't quite quantify them in the S tier because they're not essential, but Rangers are great weapons. Because of their small range, they're very good at helping the front line. For example, if you do go, let's say you go with a low armor piercing front line, such as Dwarf Rise, if you want to hold, then you could get the armor piercing output from Rangers. But I don't see, I think just having Thunderers and... Yeah, I just think having Thunderers with the added range is better, because then if you come with units that have, say, 120 to 160 range, they're just going to outrange you, and you have no shield, you're lightly armored, you're going to get hurt pretty bad, I think. They're just going to outrange you, and they're just going to bully you. So, it is good. It does mean you will have to force into artillery pieces, unfortunately. So, there are consequences to taking them, which is why I put them in the C tier. There could be a rare pick where you do see them. I think they're good, but I don't think they're essential. I don't even think they're core units, really. I think Thunderers and other units are going to be better. But these are good because you could simply bring them on their own, and the marked by Ulthwar can almost pay for itself when synergized with Thunderers, cannons, blasting charges, whatever it may be. So we're now going to move on to Bugman Rangers. This is another sad story. I would love to love Bugman Rangers, but I don't love them. A lot of people aren't going to like what I'm going to do. I'm going to put them in good. They're not great. They're not amazing. They should be amazing, but they're not. Let's have a look. So Bugman Rangers, we'll just have a look at their stats. So they're going to be exactly the same as Rangers. They're going to offer better stats in the melee combatant side, obviously for the extra cost. They're actually really good melee combatants, so 38 melee defense, 24 melee attack. Weak on the armor, but they have really good leadership, and the crossbows are going to be exactly the same. So the crossbows are going to be the same here as the Rangers. Oh, I think they're actually in between Rangers and Quarrelers on the ammunition, but they're going to be the same damage output. Now, they do have Stalk. They do have immune to psychology, which is really nice, so that's no terror or fear. They do actually have charged defense first large. So if they do get charged, they can actually brace a little bit and negate some of that damage. And they have vanguard deployment, which you get from all rangers. So that's whether it's rangers with the great weapons or just normal rangers. So they all get vanguards, which means they can be in all those builds that we've currently talked about. And more importantly, they get liquid fortification. So that's regeneration as long as they're not wavering on leadership. Now, because they are part of the Bugmans, they get the Bugman's Brew and they can just keep drinking and regenerating. Now, there is one place you can use them. You can use them in range duels where you're trying to outfire your opponent, where you can try and regenerate or at least outlast your opponent. But if you want to go for durability, you might as well go for Quarrelers, because essentially, although you are going to get regeneration, I think for a cheaper cost you're going to get the same. You're going to get the same effect, because the durability is going to be much greater here from the Quarrelers. But I think this is the problem. I think Bugman Rangers just cost too much for what they do. They do have some amazing tools indeed. They're better melee combatants, but you don't really want to be engaging your Bugmans in melee anyway. That's not where they shine. That's not where they should shine. But even then, you could argue with the Rune of Doom, and you could argue with the Rune of Speed. You could buff them, put them up to 48 melee attack. That would be the same here as a Dwarf Warrior. So arguments could be made. Maybe even in the new DLC, Bugman Raiders could be better, but I think the 20 stack is favoured more than, say, a 15 stack, considering when you have that map-wide effect with Thorek. So I think for that case, I'm going to be having to have them lower than Quarrelers and Rangers, but they certainly can be utilised in push builds. That being said, yeah, I think they're going to remain there. I don't think a lot of people are going to like that, but I think that's where they should be. We're now going to move on to Iron Drakes. So Iron Drakes, C or D for me. I'm going to say C. I'm going to put the Scolder Guard in. I would have put them in F, but they do have a matchup where you can utilize them. I reckon there's two matchups you can utilize them in. So if you can't utilize these units in any matchups, they go in the F tier. Scolder Guard will go there. Iron Drakes will go there, and the Trollhammer Torpedoes have to be B. They have to be B because they're not core units. You wouldn't expect them to see them at least half the matchups. I wouldn't even say they're essential in certain matchups, but they are very good. They are very good indeed. So let's put them all in. Let's see what they're all about. So the last units are range here. So what do we get for the Iron Drakes? Iron Drakes offer a really nice flaming attack at 80 meter range. So it's not huge, but they do have really good resistances. 125 armor. They actually share the same armor as the Norgrimlings. So they actually have the same Ironbreaker armor, which means they're super tanky. They have 70% fire resistance, and they actually get increased magic resistance. Now, I don't know why that is compared to the Norgrimlings. They only get, I think it's meant to be the armor, but maybe there's something about the Iron Drakes that gives them a plus 10%. It might just be a balancing, I'm not too sure, but it seems to be that they just get added magic resistance. The burnt is really nice. It can be balanced really nicely with the ROR Goblobber that gives negative 16, and then you obviously get negative 8 from the Iron Drake, and then negative 10 from the artillery, and then negative 5 from the shots from range. So that's going to be negative 15 plus negative 24. So you're going to be looking somewhere in the region of negative 39 leadership just from being shot, let alone the damage incoming. So these sort of combinations can be really, really high when you talk about negatives to leadership. And there's a lot of units out there that don't even have 50 leadership. So these units can be used to break rather quickly, and their damage output with 163 missile strength is huge. They are strong, but they are very unique. They don't have many matchups. I think against undead, any of the undead factions, they can do well. They do well against, because of the fire damage, they do well up against regeneration builds. So you could see them utilized against greenskins, or anything with light armor as well, so maybe even Skaven. Or you could maybe see them up against Yeah, Wood Elves as well. Wood Elves could be good, especially if you went for the tree build. I think a tree build is very dangerous against Dowies. You probably wouldn't expect to see it, but you could. But the Scolder Guard, what do the Scolder Guard offer that are different? So they have a reduction here in missile strength, but it turns to armor piercing. They do have an added 10 range, so they do get extra range. They get increased melee attack and melee defense. They've actually got pretty decent stats. They're very, very durable. 95 leadership, so they're going to hold for a very long time. Good armor, of course, so they're a really, really tanky unit. They do actually have an added 20% physical resistance. The same resistance is here as before, but here is armor piercing as well. So there is an argument that they could be used against greenskins to counter Black Orcs, and there is an argument that they could be used to counter dinosaurs in the Lizardman matchup. Now, the reason why they could be used in the Lizardman matchup is rock drops from pterodons have a fire-based damage, which means up against any of the Iron Drakes with a massive 125 armor, they also have fire resistance, which means they pretty much take absolutely 0 damage in that matchup, which means essentially there could be a justification with the armor-piercing output for taking the Scolder Guard. Now, I haven't tested this myself, but I can struggle to see that. I don't know why you would take the Scolder Guard when you could take a unit of Thunderers. I think the unit of Thunderers are going to offer more than what the Scolder Guard are going to do. I think the unit of Thunderers is actually going to keep the Pterodons back anyway. If you bring 3 or 4 Thunderers, you're just going to be shooting Pterodons out of the sky. You've also got Flash Bomb, you've got Rune of Slowness. You have all the abilities to take down Pterodons so they don't drop rocks anyway. It's not as easy as that, of course, but I think justifying the Scolder Guard is difficult. I'd have to do some more testing. They are extremely durable. As a backline unit, they are one of those units you do not have to worry about. I just don't see them having any benefit over the Iron Drakes. The Iron Drakes obviously get the negative to leadership. They're very good up against chaff. They also have flaming attacks. So I see more utilization coming out of Iron Drakes than you do the Scolder Guard. But here we have the Iron Drake Hammer torpedoes. Now these are by fact the best anti-large infantry range in the game. These torpedo missiles are huge. 88 armor piercing anti-large weapon, so it's going to be 116 armor piercing and bonus versus large of 24, so you're talking slayer damage here on armor piercing missiles. They do have 90 range, and also they're very tanky. 125 armor, and they also have 85 leadership, so they're going to stand for a very long time. Also here you can see they have the fire resistance and the magic resistance from the same armor, which means rock drops yet again don't do too much, and they're very good against those large dinosaurs. The only problem is 90 range. They do not offer much range support, which means if the dinosaurs go with a kite build, these Trollhammer torpedoes are just useless. They're not going to do anything, whilst your Thunderers can at least counter a build such as a kite build. So they are situational, but they are very good. You can certainly utilize them. If someone goes for a full dino rush against you, Trollhammer torpedoes will kill Croxagors in seconds. They'll kill large dinosaurs. Dreadosaurians stand literally no chance. They're very good up against vampire counts. They are really tanky, really durable, good anti-large tools that if you have them, people are scared to face Iron Drakes. So the Trollhammer torpedoes are something you can definitely bring. Whether I think I'm a fan of them or not is yet to be decided. I've had mixed results, which is why I put them in very good. If they had a little bit more range, even if it was 100, 100, even 110 range, would probably put them up to essential. It's the range that is the limiting factor here for them, unfortunately. So now we're going to move here onto the artillery pieces. We have quite a few. Let's start here. Let's start with the cannon. The cannon's the easiest one of all of them. The cannon is arguably either essential or core units. Now, I'm going to put it in core units, and I'm going to say why. So you could see these in a lot of builds. Not every build. You could see these in at least half of builds. These cannons on this artillery piece here. So for the Dwarfs in general, they have the most accurate and most efficient artillery in the game, period. And I think these cannons here are the best artillery model in the game. They outtrain pretty much all, if not every single artillery in the game. And for value for cost, they are the best. I actually can't really think of a bad thing to say about these artillery pieces. 440 range. They do get outranged by other artillery pieces, but their accuracy level is exceptional. The accuracy is way and above anything else. Reload speed is pretty decent. 213 armor piercing. They are very, very good. They're by far the best on the roster. I don't really have a bad thing to say about them, I don't think. The only thing that doesn't justify them being in the S tier is the fact they're not essential. You don't have to have them to win, but at the same time, they're always very nice to have. They can very easily double their value, very comfortably, as long as they're well protected. If they're used on the right map, they're devastating in some matchups. They can be a win or a loss condition entirely. Bolt throwers, I think grudge throwers, yeah, probably very bad. And the ROR could be B tier. Yeah, I'm going to say B tier, and then it's either bad or very bad. We'll come back to this. So, grudge throwers and goblobbers. Now, the reason why it's very bad in the grudge throwers in B is the fact you would never pick the grudge thrower, and you probably only ever pick the goblobber. Now, for dwarf artillery, for grudge throwers or catapults in general, they're going to be very accurate because they are dwarven. But even for dwarven catapults, they are very, very inaccurate. The only time you'd ever take it over a cannon is if you had terrain in front of you that would block cannon fire. And even then, cannon fire is actually more arced than people are used to. So it's worth checking out maps and making sure you have the right artillery pieces for that map. And even then, if you would benefit more from having a grudge thrower than a cannon, I probably just wouldn't take any artillery at all. I don't rate grudge throwers. I don't think they're good. They do have good armor piercing. But in general, what you get here, you get much better stats over the board. So you're going to get more leadership and more missile strength. The rest doesn't really matter. But the more important thing here is you get the discourage. The negative 16 leadership there is really good at removing other crews from other artillery pieces, or is very good at breaking low leadership infantry in the front line, or even for that matter range or skirmish cavalry. You're always going to take the goblobber over the grudge thrower. For that 200 cost, it's more than enough worth it, even just on the bonuses, and for that discourage as well. It's just way and above better. It's got missile resistance, magic resistance as well, which means, spirit leech, etc. is not going to do anywhere near as much damage. So it's something to take into consideration that I would never pick a grudge thrower. I just wouldn't go with one, which is why I'm going to put it in F tier. I don't rate it, but I do like the goblobber. It offers something different. I think B is a bit high. I'm going to put it in C because I wouldn't say you use it very commonly, but there are some rare instances you can use it. It is good. I wouldn't say it was great. I wouldn't say it was very good. So I would probably put it in C tier. Bolt throwers, average, I think. And we'll move these all in now. So probably very bad. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to say... yeah, I'm going to put it like that, and I'll explain why. So, bolt throwers, organ guns, and flame cannons. So, bolt throwers, very low on the range. All three of these are very low on the range, which is why I kind of put all three of them together. So, 340 for the bolt thrower, 300 here from the organ gun, and 230 from the flame cannon. So, one of the weaknesses that they all share is the fact that most artillery will outrange them, and they can effectively out-trade them. So, you could take cannons from the Empire. They'll comfortably kill most of the models before they even get in range. Now, one thing you could see for factions that perhaps don't have artillery, you could certainly see multiple bolt throwers. You could see 2 or 3 bolt throwers that are supported by maybe a couple of thunderers to deal with heavily armored infantry, and you could certainly see that. So you could certainly have that as a replacement if you wanted a cheaper option for a wider front line, if you wanted to cover more... if you wanted to cover yourself a little bit more in your build, perhaps. The only problem would become if they don't have anything large. If they don't have anything large, bolt throwers are just garbage against infantry. They just struggle. It's just not what they're designed to do, and they're just not going to... They might get their value back, but they're not going to benefit your cause. And even then, you're going to want the goblobber if you think that's a possibility. So I think for that instance, I think it's a bit of a dice roll. If they don't bring any range and they've got lots of large entities, they're amazing. If they've brought any sort of artillery or they've got mass infantry, they're a bit of a liability. So it's a dice roll. And in my builds, I don't really like to take a bit of a dice roll, which is why I put bolt throwers relatively low. They can be utilized, but I don't ever see them and I don't really ever bring them. Organ guns are very nice. Organ guns have lots of damage output and they have an exceptional amount of damage output. 334 armor piercing. And these are just machine guns. They just mow down cavalry. They mow down anything elite. And especially anything large. The problem, yet again, is range. And that's going to be the problem with both. And their cost. If we took 2 organ guns or we took 2 flame cannons, I would always rather take 2 cannons. And let's say for the organ guns, they're 2200, these are 1600. I'd rather take 2 of these and a unit of Urkra miners than 2 organ guns. Or when it comes to 2600 compared to 1600, I'd rather take 2 cannons and a unit of the Grumbling Guard. That's the way I think about it. I think the 2 cannons are going to get their value and the rest are going to struggle. And the cannons cover themselves for other artilleries and they cover themselves for hitting almost anything. They're good up against elite infantry, they're good here up against cavalry, they're good up here against large dinosaurs or any other large monsters. And with the range here, the flame cannons are even less. They do have those flame attacks and they do have burnt for that negative leadership. However, that 230 range is killer. It really is killer. I mean, you can think about some units like Waywatch, for example, have 190 range. They nearly have as much range as artillery. It's kind of scary when you think about it that way. Like, Warlock Giselles outrange them. So Warlock Giselles could just delete 2,600 of your army off the rip. So these are considerations you have to take. You could use these in specific matchups, like if you're expecting elite builds, or like Chaos. Organ Guns can do well against Chaos, so can Flame Cannons. Flame Cannons can also do really well up against Vampire Counts, and so can Organ Guns. But they're very elite factions where you're going to expect lots of armor, or you're going to expect lots of elite infantry or large monsters where they can't really fight back with any range. So they are items you have to take into consideration, but even then they have dogs, which are very fast, they get in the back. If you happen to have a second lapse of micro, you've got 2,200 or 2,600 down the drain already. So it's a large investment for a very large risk, in my opinion, which is why I really don't have them very high here on the leaderboard. And this moves us here to the war machines. Now we are going to have the gyrocopters, one here with the brimstone gun, and the gyro bombers. Now here, we're going to go C there for the gyrocopter. The brimstone gun is going to join the A, and here the gyro bombers are going to join in the B. And let's go through it. So as we can see, gyrocopters, brimstone guns, gyro bombers, and the sky hammer. Now, gyrocopters against the brimstone guns. The first thing we notice, both have 3 models, but as you can see, have plus 25 range here for the brimstone gun. Only 75 range for the gyrocopters. Now they have 2 very different objectives. Here for the gyrocopters, they are going to be anti-infantry, but they do have poor accuracy. Missile strength is going to be a lot less. They both have the same amount of gyro bombers, so they have 2 bombs there that they can drop off against infantry. But these gyrocopters would be good up against, say, lightly armored infantry, for example, Skaven or Greenskins, because they also have that negative 10 leadership from artillery attacks, whilst brimstone guns, in my opinion, have way more utility. They're going to be anti-large, armor-piercing, and they do fire damage. So they're going to be good up against any regenerating units or any units that have fire weaknesses. So you can talk about Treekin, you can talk about Tomb King Legendary Lords that are large, have armor, and have fire weaknesses because of their robes, or you can talk about giant river troll hags. With their spirit leech, you can just absolutely whack them as well, really, really hard. You're going to get increased on your ammunition damage, and they're going to be anti-large, and they're also going to be armor-piercing. They're very good up against cavalry as well. Bonus 15 bonus first large as well for the extra 100 cost. So not only do you just get the added range, I just think they're way better. You do get more ammunition for the gyrocopters, but they really do struggle up against armor. They really do struggle. So for me, I'm always going to take a brimstone gun over a gyrocopter, and I think they're way and above better. And then we go to the gyro bombers. Now, the gyro bombers are a bit different. They are more heavily focused on bombs. As you can see, they have 11 bombs, but it's only going to be one of them. All of these have 100 armor, so they're super tanky. We have 105 speed here for the gyrocopters, and for the gyro bombers, we have 90. Now, they can fire whilst moving. Now, they don't have 360-degree fire, but they can fire whilst moving forward. Now, as we can see, they do actually have a suppressed ability as well, which is really nice. And lots of armor piercing here. 1,174 missile strength, which is just ginormous. And if you compare it here as well, 1,509 extra 335 for the Sky Hammer. It's just huge damage output. Even when they go into melee combat as well, 40 melee attack with 88 weapon strength here. And it's going to be the same 50 there for the Sky Hammer as well. So for that extra 350 cost, you have to justify why you might bring it. I think the leadership is the most important part. But I think against factions such as Chaos, these are very necessary. So a lot that's seen here in these games, you are going to be having Manticores. Manticores have, I think it's 85 speed, so they can catch gyro bombers if you're not careful. So having that suppressed ability means is as long as one is shooting, the other can drop, and then he can start shooting, and then the second one can drop, so that the very nice manticore can never catch you. And when you have 105 speed there for the brimstone guns, they're pretty much never going to catch you anyway. So as long as you keep moving and you keep on top of your micro, you have your anti-large shots. Something that I commonly see, or I commonly bring as well, up against Chaos, is the Royal Dowie Air Force. So you're going to be having something along the lines of this. So 3 brimstone guns with the gyro bomber and the sky hammer. Just loads of damage output. You focus on killing everything in the sky. You kill all the throwing axes, and then you just bomb all of the infantry. And here for the sky hammer, you're also going to be having the sky hammer bombs, which is going to be 5 of them, but they have a much larger strike area. And also they're very good up against armor. So these are some very, very good units. They do have some really good picks. They're very good up against Greenskins, Chaos. I've had some good work up against Vampire Counts, Tomb Kings. Royal Dowie Air Forces can be very, very strong, and probably one of the most hated styles of play in the game, actually. Yeah, I just because it is so difficult to deal with, and if you catch somebody off guard, there's almost nothing you can do about it. You shoot everything that's large and important, and then you bomb all the infantry, and you finish it off with the rest of the elite that you do have in a box. And this leaves us here with the rest of the Lords and Heroes. So here we're going to be going through. So we're going to start here with yet another sad story. He's going to be in D. A lot of you might agree with me. A lot of you might hate me for that. He's going to be in D for a reason. The biggest reason is cost. And also the current meta of play. Now, if we look at all these items, so the Great Book of Grudges is something really nice that he offers, and before Thorek Ironbrow, he was the only one that could offer melee attack buffs to the Dwarven roster. It used to be +9, and now it's +10, so we did get a buff, and there's no increase to cost, so that's really nice in a 55-meter radius. The only problem there is, of course, we talked about it, AoE spells, extra damage, extra range, and it's an extra pain. Therefore, this can take a bit of a nerf from that. I would say don't take stand your ground. It's only 18 seconds. It's not too important. Most dwarves have very high melee defense anyway, and they all have pretty good leadership. So for the 140 cost, I don't think it's worth it. Foe Seeker is not worth it either. He is 30 speed. That's not going to change, and you're not going to see much benefit from it anyway. We also have his best ability, which is going to be the Oath of Vengeance. That's a 200-meter range from -24 melee defense. Now that's really, really strong. 44 seconds is huge. That could be very good in almost anywhere on the battlefield that's engaged, that you can just reduce by half, if not more, of its melee defense, making it truly snipeable. The last one is the High King. Now, the High King is a coin flip. I never take it. The reason is he's already way too expensive, and this item only becomes active when you're below 50% HP. If you're above, you get no benefits at all, and it costs money, and it costs quite a bit indeed. It costs 145, which is, when you add it here with Stand Your Ground, you're already talking about 280, and then with Foe Seeker, you're also talking about another 70. So you're racking up to nearly the cost here of some minus or blasting charges. Now, when it does go below 50% HP, the nice thing you do get is immune to psychology. You get increased melee attack, you get base weapon damage charge, but the most important thing is ITP. So if you do go with a build that's really wide that ITP can help with, that's great. But if you go with a Longbeard army that also has some quite elite units such as PK Guard or Norgrimling Ironbreakers, then you're not going to see too much use from the ITP. And also, most people just ignore Thorgrim if he takes it. And even if you are going to be below 50% HP, it is going to buff you in a way that it's going to buff the entire force and give you a good chance of winning, but you're already losing at that point. So for me, it just seems like a bit of a counterproductive way that you just kind of want Thorgrim to run in, get half hit, and then start fighting. Like, it just seems like a counterproductive way to play to me. So that's why I don't particularly like that item. So you've only kind of got really 2 items that you can use, and one of them's been nerfed in the current meta anyway. And even then, he's super expensive. We said it was 1828 for Thorgrim, and he offers just way head and shoulders above what Thorgrim can, unfortunately. His stats aren't great. He struggles with armor piercing. He does have magic attacks, good armor, yeah, good leadership, but it's not great overall. It's really not great. Same magic resistance, missile resistance, but he's huge. He can only be on a chair, so he's just he is automatically large, and he is in charge, but very easily shot. So for me, I can't justify him any higher than D. So what we'll do here, we'll very quickly go through the rest, actually. We'll go through all the legendary lords. Grombrindle is going to be in F. It's a sad story. We'll get to that. For C, we are going to be having our big boy Belegar. And B, we are going to be having the man, the myth, the Ungrim legend. So let's move in. So, let's get all three up. So here, we'll actually start with the sad story. We'll start with Grombrindle. So Grombrindle's a bit of a sad story. He's 1,600 base. His items are not very good. Well, they're very good, but they're very expensive. The Rune Helm of Fire is nice, good at countering fear and terror, so potentially has a place against undead, but even then, leadership is exceptionally high for Dowie anyway. So in my opinion, it's worthless. I don't think there's no reason to take it. And then you have the Rune Axe of Grombrindle. Now, this is really nice at sniping out other lords and heroes, giving a negative to leadership and helping break. You know, he could be very good at sniping someone elite, for example, Sigvold. However, for 240 gold cost, it's not worth it. You only get that use for, well, it is 26 seconds. It is quite long, but it's only every 2 minutes. I don't think it's worth half the cost of a unit of Dwarf Warriors. I can't see this racking up the same value that a unit of Dwarf Warriors would get. So that's why I don't justify it. Foe Seeker, there is no point. You could justify it when he had Flash Bomb, but as you can see here, he's lost Flash Bomb. So Flash Bomb was great before. It would be a 30-meter radius around Grombrindle. Flash Bomb will go down, negative melee defense, negative speed by 72%, and then he would just whack whatever's in that circle. Which means if you try to push into the middle of the build, Grombrindle will counter that by a Flash Bomb, and then he will just try and snipe whatever's around him with Slayers. Now, unfortunately, the imbued cost is Grombrindle has no fear. That's what puts him up to 1,600. I reckon he's a model count of about 1,400 in real cost, but you have to take into factor Grombrindle has no fear. You kind of have no choice. I think to make him better, you need to strip this item and make it an ability that you can or cannot bring. Because unfortunately here, it is nice, but I think unfortunately it's not good enough for what you pay for it. So it is going to be 200 cost because it is a rare item. But I don't think it's worth it. 55 meters radius, 24 melee defense and unbreakable, 24 seconds, but it's only one use. You can only use it once. If you could use that repeatedly, it'd be way more valuable, I think. Maybe a longer cooldown time. It does say 2 minutes, but yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. I just think, unfortunately, 1.6k for 1.8k, an extra 200 cost, you can get somebody who can benefit the whole army. Grombrindle doesn't really benefit much at all. You can get magic damage from Thorek Ironbrow. You could even get it from Grombrindle if you like. From Thorgrim Grudgebearer, but Grombrindle he really doesn't offer much. He is unbreakable, but the better unbreakable lord is going to be Ungrim. Ungrim, when naked, is super cheap. 1,250. He's the second best choice you've got because he obviously anti-large and armor piercing. He'll actually beat Kolek in a one-on-one, so he's really, really good at taking out large legendary lords and just any large foes in general. Plus 30 bonus for large, that's going to be the same as your Slayers with great weapons. He has a very, very good charge bonus, good melee attack, decent melee defense for a Slayer King, 120 armor. He's also unbreakable. He also has charge defense first large, missile resistance, magic resistance. He doesn't have any shields, so he's not super tanky against any range, but still 120 armor and 15 missile resistance should cover him for the majority. But against heavy gunpowder factions, he can struggle, that's for sure, and that's where Belegar Ironhammer comes in. But we'll get to him in a second, and I think by far for 1,250, he offers you an alternative that you can't get from Thorek. He's a very good anti-large sniper. You could bring him, say, for example, with a Runesmith. You pop down there Rune of Slowness, and then you just try and snipe using Ungrim and maybe, say, some Dragonback Slayers. I think that's where he could really be strongly utilised. And that's just something you can't offer from Thorek Ironbrow. The only other offer is going to be from Belegar. Now, Belegar, if you strip him, is going to be 1,000. And he's super tanky. Silver Shield, 120 armor. That's going to be 55% missile resistance. On top of his 15 already, making it 70 if he's facing in the correct direction. Magic resistance. Expert charge defense, which means he negates all charge if he's braced. And he also has that encourage, of course, with all the lords. And yeah, he's pretty decent overall. As you can see, 60 melee attack, 60 melee defense, good leadership. He's not unbreakable, which is what the big benefit here for Ungrim is, but he also struggles with armor piercing. He really doesn't have much where you're going to get a truckload here from Ungrim. Now, he does have an increase there to his melee defense and also his hit points compared to Ungrim, so he is going to be more tanky. So against heavy missile factions, you could definitely see Belegar being a selection. As Thorek there on his nice anvil is going to be a juicy big target to shoot. So that's why you can see some of these legendary lords in their position. I don't think here, unfortunately, Belegar is going to be the top selection, But you could certainly see him here in the C pick. He's going to be good, and very good here is going to be Ungrim Iron Fist. Now we have 2 lords left. We actually have, I think he has to go down here. Yeah, I think he has to go there, and then we're going to have to put you in here. Let's put you at the end so we can compare. Yeah, it's a little bit sad, unfortunately, but these two are just not great. So if we compare here, so he's going to be absolutely naked, 850 on cost. We've already really been through all the comparisons. As we can see, Rune Lord, you're going to be having much better stats here already from Thorek Ironbrow that already paid for himself. He also gets the option for the Master of the Ancient Law, and he also gets the Rune of Doom when he's on his Anvil. The stats are only 2 better on the melee defense here for the Anvil of Doom, but that nowhere near covers up for the fact he doesn't get the Rune of Doom. He does get the Locust of Power, he does get that physical resistance, but just a much better melee combatant with armor piercing, and also here coming with armor and the magic attacks as well against ethereal units. Just way better. The runes are exactly the same. He loses his ability. The only one saving grace perhaps is the Master Rune of Grugny. A little bit cheaper, so you can bring him with this for the missile resistance. But even then, I can't justify it at all. You're taking Thorek Ironbrow every day of the week. You're never taking this guy because Thorek is just way too strong. And then you've got the normal Lord. Now, I don't like Stand Your Ground, as we said. Foe Seeker, I'm not a fan. Now, his items are dependent on leadership. If you drop below 50% leadership, you lose both these items, which means you can have 160 and 240 cost. That's 400 cost, 404 gold. So that's either miners with blasting charges cost, or nearly dwarf warriors cost. If he goes below 50% leadership, you lose all of that value. Now, the Star Metal Plate is very nice, 40 meters of -10 melee attack. Now, you can certainly see that paying dividends over a long battle, especially up against elite units. He can really aid in the front line. That's pretty much the only item I could quantify for him. But other than that, Iron Warder's Hammer giving him perfect vigor, it doesn't make sense. His stats aren't exactly amazing. He's pretty tanky, bronze shield, he's got 120 armor, 60 melee defense, 420 weapon strength. He does actually have expert charge defense against large, but even then, for the extra 100 cost we can see here, if we take Belagar instead, he's going to get a silver shield, 822 extra health, 10 leadership, 10 melee attack, and 30 weapon strength. It's just way more valuable for 100 extra gold. For that 100 extra gold, you're going to take Belagar every day of the week, and I just can't justify taking the Lord. The only thing I could justify here is if you did need to save 100 gold for a specific reason to maybe pick up an extra unit, that is the only ever time that you could justify taking the normal Naked Lord over Belagar. And here we have 3. Then there were 3. So we have the Master Engineer, the Runesmith, and also the Thane. So with the Master Engineer, the new addition here to the S table, the biggest jump so far in the Dwarfen roster. He's gone all the way from very bad all the way to the top here to essential. Now why? Why has that changed? What has been different here about him? Now, if we pop through here, he's going to be getting that one ability that has not only been improved, but been stripped from Grombrindle. Now, Flash Bomb used to be on yourself, and it used to be a 72% slow. However, it's gone down from 72 to 60%, but it's been improved. It now can be cast in a 75 meter radius, so it can be cast 75 meters anywhere around at 360 degrees on him, and then on top of that, it's a 30-degree radius wherever you decide to place it. So anything in a 30-meter radius gets a flash bomb. That's negative melee defense, negative speed, which means you do not have to move your Master Engineer. You can move him minorly and then just flash bomb wherever it is you'd like to flash bomb. He also comes with Restock, which is a brand new ability as well, which means you can offer ammunition, which even includes blasting charges. It offers restock to almost everything. So all of the artillery pieces, all of the flying war machines, that's gyrocopters, everything, all of the missile infantry, and blasting charges here from Urkra miners, also here from Nor Grimlings, miners of blasting charges as well, everything. So pretty much about 75 to 80% of the roster can benefit from restock. And being that a lot, if not all of the value in missile infantry and also artillery is offered in their ammunition, actually restoring and using restock there actually gives back some of that value to the balance of power as well, because then the game can calculate, well, if you've got this amount of ammunition, this is the potential value you should be getting. So therefore, you're actually increasing your balance of power by using restock. So that is quite a nice ability here from the Master Engineer as well. So the way you see him most of the time, you're going to see him a little bit like this, 826 cost with restock and flash bomb, but he also has the fire ring of Tori. Now, you can see the double master engineer here in competition, mostly against a single faction. You would more than likely only see him here against the vampire pirates, and the reason is Sirens. Now, the Fire Ring of Tori is the only breath spell you can get here that causes magic and fire damage. Actually, I think it's the only spell you can get that does that apart from the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. The Rune of Wrath and Ruin only does fire damage, but the magic damage here is really good at removing ethereal units, or at least any units with weak armor. So you can use it up against zombies, you can use it up against deckhand mobs, and also against all those ethereal units, and remove them nice, cheaply, and efficiently. So if you bring 2, you can also use them to snipe out up against those nice gunnery crabs that we see also often. So Master Engineers are just amazing. Flash Bomb coming with them, as well as having 180 meter range, 330 armor piercing missile strength, and even weapon strength with armor piercing in combat, 220 armor piercing as well. 38 melee attacks with good melee attack, good armor, good leadership, okay melee defense, not huge, and a lot of ammunition. So they're very, very strong. And these 3 items make for a very strong hero. So that's why, without a shadow of a doubt, he is going to be here in the S tier. And for the last 2, this is a little bit down to opinion. So I do like Thanes. I think Thanes are going to be on the average. I think they're average, and I think we're going to be seeing the Runesmith in at good. And the reason is going to be this. So the Runesmith and the Thane. So Thanes are pretty cheap, base 500, and I think it's base 550 for the Runesmith. So if we drop all the runes, there we go. So 550 there for the Runesmith, 500 for the Thane, and he does have a couple of items. So you can bring the Ironbreakers ring. You can also bring Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker. There are 2 items here that I consider to be a little bit useless. One of them is going to be the Rune of Dismay. I'm really not a fan. And the other one here is going to be the Silver Horn of Vengeance. This is probably the worst item you can get for the Dwarfs, period. I think that's ever been made. I don't see any benefit to this at all. I can't see why you'd ever spend 100 cost in bringing it. The Rune of Dismay potentially has an idea. So if you bring the Rune of Dismay, you bring Foe Seeker, and you also bring, say, for example, the Rune of Slowness with a Lord that might try and snipe, say, is Ungrim Iron Fist. What you could do with Foe Seeker for him is, say, anti-large. You could try and use your Rune of Slowness to slow down whatever you're trying to fight. You could then use your Foe Seeker to increase your speed, and then once they're trapped within your 40 meter radius, they're going to get slowed, and it's also going to stop them from charging quite so hard into you, and allow here for Ungrim to get in and snipe, or maybe even here Belagar Ironhammer. That is a potential idea, but then of course you're talking an extra 150 here for the Rune of Dismay, you're also talking an extra 80 there for Foe Seeker, and all the extra added items as well. So I don't particularly think it's worth it. Commonly seen is normally 2 naked Thanes. So you can see normally 2 naked Thanes that support a Lord, say, as Ungrim that's going to be naked, or maybe even a naked Belagar, when perhaps fighting up against Chaos if you want to fight maybe Sigvold, or you could see it very well up against Tomb Kings. That's also pretty well done up against maybe Empire, Skaven, you know, where you have a very strong triple core here that can do some good damage. So that's where you can see Thanes used. I think they're average. I don't think they're great. They're decent. Okay melee stats, good armor, bronze shield, decent leadership, encourage as well. But I think for that 500 cost with that rune, you can certainly see more damage output here from Dwarf Warriors for the same cost. So they're extremely situational, and even then, at that, they're rare. I think there are other ways that you can get around it, and I'd rather get some ranged quarrelers for a vanguard push than I would take some Thanes to snipe out an elite hero. So we'll move on to the end with the Runesmith. The Runesmith, so the old way it used to have Master Runes and then Normal Runes. Normal Runes used to be the lesser versions of the Master Runes, however now all the runes are the same. Now there is an advantage here. If you do, for example, take the Runesmith and Thorek Ironbrow, let's say he takes 2 spells, and then we take 2 spells here on the Runesmith. Now, whilst Thorek Ironbrow casts a spell, he will have a cooldown before he can use another one, but that cooldown is not going to affect the Runesmith, which means the Runesmith can now cast at will, and when he casts they'll have 2 separate cooldowns, which means you can have runes flowing far much more often. Now, in the current competitive scene, you cannot have 2 of the same rune, which means you do have to bring multiple different runes, but certainly you can bring a multitude of different runes that can affect you in different ways. So, for example, if you want to have one that's going to be a good buffing spell, so if you want to have, say, Thorek with Rune of Speed and, say, Rune of Breaking, and then you can have, for example, your Runesmith that's going to be a little bit more defensive with, say, Rune of Negation and the Rune of Slowness. So if something bad goes down, he can slow them, or you can try and protect a unit, and if you want to get aggressive, you use Thorek Ironbrow, and you can use these two to try and smash through certain areas in the map. Now, that is something you can do to synergize. And an extra addition here for the Runesmith is he's also going to be getting the Ironbeard's Ring. This solely used to be only for the Thane, but it's now been given here to the Runesmith, which kind of even makes the Thane a little bit more obsolete in itself, and even bumps this one up a tier with the added runes. So you can get Forge Fire, but it doesn't stack with the Forge Fire from Ironbrow. But I think overall the Runesmith is okay. I don't think he's great. You can, if you're not taking Thorek, you could certainly see the Runesmith being taken with a single rune. He does have Encourage. His stats are not great, but you could certainly see him here in the C tier. I think he's okay. You can certainly synergize him with any other lords, and he would do fine. I don't think he's insane, but he's not terrible either. Thane's fine. He's average, not brilliant. You're not really going to see him ever picked. And this is kind of the justification of pretty much everything I've picked today. So we can see here this is going to be the final selection. Everything S tier is something you would invariably want to work around. This is going to be predominantly the first parts of your pick, and then you're going to build around it depending on what the rest of your faction you're going to be playing against. Whilst the A units, your core units, are going to be the ones that you're going to invariably slot into the rest, and B could substitute in, but they're pretty rare. But yeah, I think invariably this is what you would bring from my point of view. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please smash that thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Drop a comment down below about what you thought as well. I'd really love to know your opinions. What did you think about this? And always take into consideration this is my opinion based on my experience in playing, my experience in casting, and all my testing I've done. I played Dwarfs an awful lot. I've tried to rationalize everything the best I can, so hopefully that gives you the best overview and knowledge of why I brought every single item to every single stage. So yeah, and if you did enjoy it, go down into that description as well. You'll be able to find a link to my Discord as well as all of my other social media pages, and you'll be able to join the Discord there where you'll see my single player, multiplayer, and you'll also be able to find tournaments, leagues, and all of the amazing content that will be hopefully coming forward here on the channel in the future. And you can also leave videos for me to cast, and you can vote on all the new content that's going to come out here in the future. If you'd like to see anything else in the future, also leave a comment down below or leave it in the Discord. You can DM me or leave it in... I'm sure you can maybe let one of my admin know as well. But yes, other than that, guys, you take care of yourself during these times, and I'll see you all in the next video or live stream. Take care.